Welcome to Down South Football Podcast, man. We're back at you with another great special edition, man. We have a special guest in the building. Well, I don't want to call him guest anymore. This is his second time being on with us. This is family. So we have our guy, Mr. Kevin Noon from BuckeyeHuddle.com, man. And he's here to give us everything about Ohio State and the upcoming matchup with the Notre Dame, I guess you want to say. But first, man, you got your boy Renard Williams. We got Mr. David Gardner, Chauncey Tuck, and Ben Dennis in the building. So we just want to say hello to y'all, man. But Kevin, how's it going, man? How you been?
Been great. Been a while since I've been on the show. Last time that I got on a show with you guys, Alabama kicked Ohio State's butt. So, hopefully that doesn't carry over this time, or I'm going to have a lot of angry people at me.
Hey, Kevin, tell me it wasn't our fault. It was the location.
Exactly.
That's exactly what it was.
It was too far down south.
I definitely agree with you on that because, hey, but you had better scenery that time. You had some good scenery going on.
Well, when you're on a bowl trip, everybody's like, oh, this is great. You get to go out to the beach and do all this stuff. I will admit, we did go to South Beach to watch a Browns game, and the Browns won a playoff game. So, I'm not a fan of the Browns or the Bengals, really, but all my friends were really excited. I drew the short straw. I was designated driver, so I guess I was the big winner that night.
I got you, man. We're gonna go ahead and get in a little bit of this Buckeye preview, man. Seeing what's been going on with the team during fall camp, and also everything that's in their preparation for the big game on Saturday, man, with Notre Dame. So, Kevin, man, I'm gonna ask the obvious question. That offense is just ridiculous. All the way down. But one of the big questions on offense that we've been hearing about is who's going to step up besides Jackson at the receiver spot. I know you got Marvin Harrison Jr. and the guy's name I'm not even going to try to pronounce. It starts with the E. I can't remember his name.
Yeah.
See, there you go. So tell me, what have you been hearing so far about what's going on in camp, and what's your expectations for that?
It's crazy because people are like, well, this offense could be just as good as last year or better. And it's like, how do you lose Chris Olave? How do you lose Garrett Wilson and sit there and say that you can do that? Well, you bring back Jackson Smith and Jigba, led the team in receptions, led the team in yardage. He's your definite one. He can play inside and outside. I kind of like him outside because then you can bring in Emeka Egbuka to play inside, who's a little bit more of a slot to me. Speedster out of Washington State, who just really hasn't had a chance to catch on yet because you've had a three-headed monster of Smith and Jigba, Wilson, and Olave. Then you have Marvin Harrison Jr., who went nuts in the Rose Bowl, had 3 touchdowns in that game. Julian Fleming was a number 1 player coming out of Pennsylvania. He's dealt with some shoulder injuries throughout his career, hasn't necessarily had a chance to really get a prolonged run. And then a sleeper, a kid out of Ohio, Jaden Ballard, a big-bodied receiver who came out of high school as a 3-star, kind of thought of boom or bust. Well, it's sounding like he's booming right now. So we'll kind of see what happens there. And then I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Cameron Babb, who was voted a captain and given the Block O jersey, which means he gets to wear the number 0. He's dealing with little bit of an injury right now. He's had 4 ACL injuries dating back to high school. He's just never been able to get on the field. The hope is that this is a short-term setback and then he'll have an opportunity to get out there. But there's no shortage of weapons. But I think the danger is that if you try to spread it around too much, do you get that rapport between C.J. Stroud and his targets? So I think that they will tighten up the bench a little bit. I really think I think JSN, Egbuka, Harrison are kind of your 3 mains. But we'll see as time goes on.
Yeah. Okay. Good. That's what I've heard. So fellas, you guys can go ahead and chop in. I know y'all got plenty of questions for Kevin. Go right ahead, man.
Kevin, I got a question for you. I got a question for you.
Go ahead.
As you just spoke about how deep the wide receiver room is, what's another unit on the team that a lot of people are not talking about that's going to surprise people this upcoming season?
I think a lot of things are going to surprise. I think safety is going to be a position. And let's remember, Ohio State's moving more. It's the Jim Knowles system now. They're moving away from that hybrid Kerry Combs, Matt Barnes system. Let's just be honest. It was the Ryan Day system. He didn't like cover 1. So if I don't like cover 1, therefore it must be pretty darn good. Well, that got exposed. I mean, especially when you lose a guy like Josh Proctor and you just don't have the guys to be able to pull it off. So now they're going to have 3 safeties out there. and they've got a ton of depth. I mean, they bring in Tanner McAllister from Oklahoma State, who's obviously run the system under Jim Knowles. Maybe a little bit of an underrated guy, 3-star type of guy, but he's played big. You get Josh Proctor back. You've got Ronnie Hickman. Ronnie Hickman led the team in tackles. Josh Proctor has kind of seen 2 seasons end with significant injuries. But then they get Lathan Ransom back, a kid out of Arizona. Ransom, the last memory fans have of him was getting hurt in the Rose Bowl, being taken off on a cart with an air cast on his leg. He's back sooner than anybody expected. So that's a kind of a big deal to me. And then keep an eye on true freshman Kai Stokes out of Armwood, outside of Tampa, Florida. He lost his black stripe, which signifies being part of the team very early in the process. Will he get a significant run this year? I don't know. But I think that he's so good that you're going to have to find ways to get him out there. But I think that the depth at safety is like an exact opposite of the depth at corner, where they only have 6 scholarship corners right now, and a couple of them are banged up for part of fall practice. So, it's kind of a feast or famine type of situation when they have so much depth at safety, maybe not as much at corner. Maybe a little easier to get a corner to flip over to safety than the other way around, because you may not have the hips to be able to play corner. That's something I'd keep an eye on. But fortunately for Ohio State, they don't really face a lot of teams that are going to put a lot of pressure on them in the passing game to start the season.
They moved to a 4-2-5, right?
Right.
Okay, I thought they did. Okay.
Right. I mean, they will play some 4-3 when they play teams like Wisconsin. They will have to bring a Sam out there in those situations. But their base right now is going to be that 4-2-5.
Gotcha.
Okay. And Kevin, I was kind of just staying on the defensive side of the ball. Ohio State has been known for their defensive line. I mean, they're going to have some dogs up there. So who do we need to look out for? I know you have Zach Harrison. He's a senior, so of course him. But is there anybody else that's going to jump off the radar when we turn the tape on?
I think one of the big things is everybody looks at Ohio State and they see Larry Johnson, who's the GOAT. I mean, when we're talking about guys that just develop defensive linemen, it's been Larry Johnson, whether or not it was when he was in the prep ranks in Virginia, in the DMV area, when he was at Penn State, and now at Ohio State. And Ohio State certainly has had some generational dudes with the last names of Bosa, and Young. So everybody,
Bosa, Young,
Bosa and Young. I mean, is expecting that to be there. And I mean, I think that with this new system, it's going to free up the defensive lineman, especially that edge position, to be able to get out there and do some more things. You bring up Zach Harrison. This is a contract year for him. I mean, we don't. Yeah. I guess now in the world of NIL, I mean, truly there are contracts, but this is the year where you need to make that money. You need to grab that bag if you can do it. So I think he's going to come out with a fire under him. Ohio State lost Tyler Friday before the start of last season. He's another veteran that could really have an impact, but keep an eye on some of these young cats like Jack Sawyer, who's going into his second year, JT Tuimoloau, who's going into his second year. I think those are going to be guys that – I think if you talk to Ohio State fans, a lot of guys are ready to be like, we've seen the old dogs. We want to see these young guys come in and see what they can do. And you've seen some flashes out of them, but I think it's going to take everybody. And Larry's said that, I probably have 12 linemen that I can roll in and out between inside and outside. And, and they have some guys returning at defensive tackle, Teron Vincent and guys like that. And then they've got some young guys, Tyleik Williams out of Virginia, Mike Hall out of Ohio. Those are two guys that, Tyleik saw a little bit of run last year, and he hit that freshman wall. He didn't have his body where it needed to be. He even admitted that here about a week ago. I'm lighter, I'm faster, I have more endurance. So I think that's going to be good for him. And then Mike Hall, we only got to see just little snippets. I believe he redshirted last year. They're going to have a lot of depth there. But, who's going to be the havoc guy? Is there going to be somebody that we can add a new partner to the law firm? I don't know. If it's going to be somebody, I think maybe it's Zach Harrison. Maybe that 5-star talent all gets put together. It's more instinctual and less having to think things through in a system that was not necessarily natural to him. But no, I don't know.
I was going to bring up TJ, but I could not pronounce his last name, so I figure I appreciate the help.
Trust me, when they were recruiting him, I sat there with that name and the phonetics, and I ran through it. I mean, and we haven't even talked about linebackers and Paula Ie Naote. I mean, as Ohio State,
that's why we had talked about him, Kevin. That's why
exactly. As Ohio State starts recruiting more Polynesians, I'm having to get a lot better at my pronunciations. And,
Right.
and if they bring somebody in, don't get me on for at least a week till I learn how to say his name. Respect a man by screwing up.
Give some time. Do some little.
That's understandable. I'm sure Tuck got a question. Go ahead, Tuck.
Well, I'm just gonna go on the. It was funny that Bernard said the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. It's kind of weird, because ever since Ohio State tried to trademark the word "the," it
was a play on words, Tuck. That's all. I was really just making a joke. I'm sorry. We know who the is.
Yeah, no, because that's the Ohio State University. Yeah. But
thank you. Yes, we know.
Speaking of Notre Dame and the Lucky Charms of the Fighting Irish, what are you? We know Brian Kelly went to LSU. Now all of a sudden he has a Southern accent. All of a sudden, what are some of the things that you're looking for? And some of the keys for offensively and defensively that's going to probably give Ohio State any kind of fits. Because I really I like Marcus and everything, but do you think you're going to see more of what they showed in the bowl game, or you think they're going to show something different? Because he is the same. I mean, he's a defensive guy. So do you think anything's going to change?
Well, I mean, you got to remember at the bowl game, he stepped into his role and he had Brian Kelly's staff, and now he has a new staff. He has Al Golden at DC. I mean, he's got some other guys in different positions. So I don't think it's as easy to sit there and say, well, that's what Marcus Freeman's about. Those are his philosophies. I mean, he doesn't even have the same players. Kyron Williams isn't there, so they lose a 1,000-yard rusher. So that's a big deal. I mean, they lose Austin at receiver. It's a different team. But for what I think Notre Dame is going to do, I mean, one concern is Tyler Buchner. There's not a lot of tape on him. You don't go back and watch high school tape for a kid at this point. I mean, he played in 10 games, but it was very sparingly. I mean, he's a mobile quarterback. I don't care how disciplined you are. Mobile quarterbacks can always be a pain in the to try and chase them down. I also think that Michael Mayer, their tight end, he is problematic. He's 70-some receptions, 7 touchdowns, 800 and some yards. And I don't want to go through what happened 8 years ago doesn't mean anything to what's going to happen on Saturday night. But, I've watched Ohio State struggle with tight ends before, whether it's Iowa or Wisconsin or, teams that they play with in conference that they should have scouted. I mean, and they certainly have Notre Dame scouted with this being week 1 of the season. But, Michael Mayer is going to get his. I think really what you need to do, I think football 101, you got to win the war in the trenches. You got to win line play. I mean, all right, so we're just going to take that one off the table because that's a no-brainer. We all know that. I think it all comes down to Ohio State's ability to run and to stop the run. I think Ohio State needs to prove that it can run the ball. We know that Ohio State can throw the ball forever and ever and ever and ever. But if you look at where Ohio State struggled last year, Oregon, Michigan, to an extent, Utah, they couldn't run. Over the last 2 years, I've watched Ohio State struggle on 3rd and short and 4th and short. I've seen them have to resort to throwing, and that's all well and good. Move the chains, put up points. That's what you got to do. That's the name of the game. But if you can't sit there with Trevion Henderson and Mayan Williams and bang out a 3rd and 2, that's problematic. On the other side, I think you need to make Notre Dame one-dimensional. I think that you need to sit there and say, okay, Tyler Buchner, you have, you're 21 of 35 or something in that neighborhood as a passer. Beat us in the air. You don't have one of your top receivers who's hurt at this point. Another guy seems to be banged up. You've got Michael Mayer, obviously, who's a stud. You've got some other young bucks that have, a lot of talent, but haven't necessarily put anything on film. So beat us in the air. That's what we want to see you do. We know that you have, 3 talented but maybe unproven running backs. You got a quarterback who can execute the Q run, but we want you to beat us up top. And and Ohio State's been able to do that in a lot of years. To do that generally wins just because they can out talent a team. I don't think that you're going to sit there and look at Ohio State and Notre Dame and say, well, Ohio State is significantly more talented than Notre Dame. I think they're both, the talent is pretty even. I think, Ohio State might have some edges at some spots, but that's negligible in certain instances. But I think it's run both ways.
I want to ask a question. I mean, about this Ohio State Notre Dame game, and I hear the narratives about like, hey, it's Notre Dame, but let's say something happens and Ohio State loses this game. Like, how detrimental do you think this is to the season going forward? Whether it's confidence, everything. We know it's first game, and we know if Notre Dame pulls this off, it would be great for them. But the expectations, of course, Ohio State winning, i.e., the 17.5 point favorite. So everybody is on the Ohio State bandwagon. Like, when you're at the facility all the time, like, what is the attitude of the team? Like, what would you think would happen with them moving forward if something does happen, they lose this game?
I think that the story would be reminded that that when they won the national championship in 2014, they lost game 2 of the season, a home game against Virginia Tech, and it wasn't necessarily a great Virginia Tech team. So, all is not lost at that point. We all sit there and get about week 8, week 9, and we see like 10 undefeateds, and everybody's like, all right, who's getting left out, with nobody going through the schedule to realize 8 of those teams are playing each other. I mean, you're going to have 4 teams that are going to get a loss like that because of just head to head. And then we get to the end of the year, there's 2, 1, undefeated team. So I think that it's a case of, I think the worst thing would be if Ohio State goes out and lays an egg and gets blown out, because at that point, then does the college football playoff committee be like, well, you had your one real big game, and yes, Michigan's going to be a big game, and we'll see who else is ranked at various points. Well, Penn State isn't ranked at this point, but Wisconsin, whoever that's on the schedule. I mean, I think it's a challenging enough schedule that Ohio State can build up, and with just the credibility that the Big Ten has, is probably the number 2 league in the nation. Should get them back. I think a one-loss Big Ten team, especially somebody who can go undefeated in conference play, is more than fine. You're not going to be getting probably the 1 or 2 seed in the college football playoff little 4-team tournament, but that's fine. You just need a chip in a chair. Ohio State, the only year that won the college football playoff championship was the 4, and had to go through Alabama in New Orleans. So it would be bad. I mean, I think that there would probably be a lot of fans that would be like, if Notre Dame wins, it's probably not going to be because I think it's going to be because the defense didn't get it done. I think there'll be a lot of people being like, I thought this was supposed to be fixed. I thought we got this right. What's wrong? So then it's a matter of being able to shut that noise out.
Gotcha.
Right. And I think, though, to that same point, if they do drop that game, I still think they'll be okay. I think now Notre Dame preseason poll, what do they said that, like 5?
5.
5 and they're 2. So, and you got a long season ahead. I think you have, based off of now, you got Wisconsin ranked, Michigan State, and Michigan. Of course, we expect all of that to change, but I think they'll be okay. I mean, it doesn't stop them from winning their conference. So they'll be fine. As far as the morale of the team, like you said, I mean, they dropped the game last year to Oregon that was a shocker to me. Actually, I was the only one on the show to pick that game, by the way. But I think that shameless plug. But I think they'll be fine though. That's a good question.
It's not a good shameless plug when you got an Ohio State guy now, but we're gonna move on.
I mean, I just kind of tell it how I saw it, But I gotta tell it how I saw it. But it's really not
but
shameless.
Also to your point, Dave, I would think that the mood of the team is knowing that with this game being big as it is, and knowing what happened last year with Oregon, that they know that they have to finish to completion. And they know they need to, like I said, it's a 17.5 point spread, but it's like, look, they need to just make sure they win the game. Marcus Freeman is having this press conference and he's saying about, hey, it's 17.5 points. We're going to do whatever we need to do. But I would assume Ohio State is just like, look, we just need to make sure we go in, compete, and finish the deal.
Yeah, I mean, it's about getting that win. I mean, it's, style points and whatever. I mean, trust me, there is a large segment of the population that's going to care if Ohio State wins by 17 or wins by 18, if that's the number it goes off at. I mean, that's fine. And as we see more and more states pass sports betting legislation, it's a huge industry. I mean, I get it. I mean, I would be lying if I said that I've never really paid attention to the lines. I pay attention to the lines too, just like anybody else. But when you're in there, 1 point win, 21 point win, 41 point win, it doesn't matter. The number that matters is what's the number in the L column at that point? And you want to sit there and try and get through as close to 0 as possible if you want to sit there and realize your goals.
100%. I'm with you on that. That was I guess we hit on a lot of stuff with that, but talking about the Notre Dame game, I think of course it's going to be huge, it's going to be great. But we did not talk a lot about Trayvon Henderson, man, and that I'm expecting a lot from that guy. Have you seen any difference in him in like fall camp, or like maybe like more muscle, more more quicker, or what are you seeing from him to make him the potential Heisman candidate?
He's got a nicer ride because of NIL. I'll promise you that. I mean, let's not forget with Henderson, with Trayvon Henderson, that he didn't have a senior season in the state of Virginia in 2020 due to COVID. So everything he did, he kind of came in cold. I mean, he did have the opportunity to go through off season, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, but he wasn't coming off of a senior season of where he was able to play football every week. That just wasn't there. I had the opportunity to go to where to his hometown and watch him go through some drills, and he's like, I do this like daily. I go through, I'll either get a couple guys to work out with me, I'll work out with myself. Now he's got a team of of weight guys and trainers and dietitians and everything else. So I mean, and you go through such a physical change from 18 to 19. You go from being kind of still a kid to being, really, a guy. I mean, and he's a guy. And, he had the big games early in the season. He did rush for, almost 1,250 yards last year, but the offense did kind of hit a little bit of a wall when it came to running the ball, as, we kind of talked about a little bit earlier. And I'm expecting him to come out and say, I'm not a flash in the pan. This was, that wasn't a fluke, what happened early in the season. I'm going to do it. Plus, too, with Mayan Williams on his tail, he knows that he's going to have to bring it.
Exactly.
Mayan's going to be pushing for it. I mean, Ohio State did lose Evan Pryor, their number 3 back out of the state of North Carolina, with a knee injury, and he's done for the year. But they have a true freshman out of Memphis, Dallin Hayden, who's also going to be pushing. And while Dallin doesn't know what he doesn't know, but if there's a position where I think young guys can step in and have an impact early, it's running back. Run to the light. Run where they're not dudes. And and Dallin Hayden is plenty talented to be able to do that. So Trayvon Henderson has not been given anything. He's got to hold on and keep it.
Gotcha.
I just have one more question for you, Kevin. With Jim Knowles coming over as defensive coordinator, how has the team taken to his new philosophies and principles? Has it been an easy transition, or has it been a little difficult, or how has that transition been?
A lot of these guys come out of programs where they don't lose that often, and while Ohio State didn't lose that often last year, the defense certainly took a lot of verbal slings and arrows from people, and nobody liked that. So you bring in a guy who's the head coach of the defense, who had one of the top defenses in the nation last year at Oklahoma State, and he comes in and he's telling you things, and he's like, we're going to do this. I think, the buy-in has been real. The buy-in has been strong. The buy-in has been immediate. Now, that doesn't mean that everything has been to a case of where, okay, I know what you're saying immediately. I mean, it took Jim Knowles several years to install everything that he wanted to at Oklahoma State. And I think that just the expectation of game one, that they're going to sit there and hold Notre Dame to 3 points, and that's going to be a chippy, stupid field goal just so they don't get shut out. I mean, I think that's probably overreaching. Notre Dame has got helmets and pads and scholarships too. I mean, they're a talented team. They're number 5 in the nation for a reason. But when every player that I've had a chance to speak to, either on or off the record, all are very excited about everything that Jim Knowles has brought to the table. I mean, they say that there's a lot more, that they're able to react a little bit more, and nobody wants to sit there and denigrate the previous administration, what happened there. Nobody's like, well, we couldn't do this or we couldn't do that. It's all, now we can do this, now we can do that. We feel more comfortable in the system. And Ohio State had to make a change midway through the season, and they did go from the cover 1 to more 2 and 4, going from single high safety to a couple of safeties out there. But even with all of that, there were times that Ohio State, just due to some depth and other issues, was running a 4-4, which I think any Ohio State fans like, I never want to see that again. I never want to see another 4-4 out there again. And under Jim Knowles, I don't think that's going to be something we're going to see. So, the expectations are high, and it's a case of the players are holding themselves to this high standard.
Right.
Got you.
Yep.
Dave or Tuck, y'all got another question for him? I got one final last fun question for him, but I'm gonna say that I want to see what you guys got.
No, I don't really have a question. I just have a comment though on that 4-2-5 defense, which is one of my favorite defenses because it's so flexible. You know, it allows you to match up where a 4-3, you know, may not allow that. You know, allows an extra man in the box, allows you to, you know, just so much you can do. You know, you can play 2 safeties high, 1 safety high. You roll a man in the box. It's so much you can do, and I'm just interested with the type of athletes that Ohio State have, how that looks. Which I think, if I'm not mistaken, Alabama adopted the 4-2-5 years ago. I think that's one of their staple defenses that they run, their packages that they run. So it's going to be interesting. Ohio State is one of the teams that I'm looking forward to see this year. I only have 2. Like I told her, I only have 2 teams I want to see this year: Ohio State and USC. I don't want to see nobody else.
Yes.
But you know, those are my 2 teams I want to see. But yeah, man, that's kind of where I'm at. It's going to be exciting. It'll be exciting.
Yeah, we didn't get an opportunity to see a lot of 11-on-11 work this year. I mean, we had, I think, 4 periods or 4 days that we were going to be allowed to see bits and pieces of practice. They took one of them away from us, not because we were bad or anything. They just took it away from us. So, and you know, like 2 of the days we got to see stretching. So I can tell you they're a very limber team. That they're very disciplined, very warming up. But then it's like, okay, you guys got to go. We're going to start running meaningful stuff. You guys have got to leave the facility at that point. But
I wonder what caused that though, kid. What do you think?
Us losing the one? Basically, my understanding, without anybody telling me, a player got hurt in practice that day, or like the day before, and I don't think they wanted us to go to practice, see he wasn't there, and start running around talking about it. So you know, coaches are very, you know, they got conspiracy theories and everything else, and you know, there's a reason why these college coaches make millions and millions and millions of dollars to overanalyze everything and have, you know, these staffs that are just huge with all of these advisors or whatnot. And somebody's probably like, it'd probably be best not to let the media come into this one. Yes, yeah, we would have probably figured out somebody was not there and been like, where exactly is Evan Pryor, or where exactly is so and so?
Right. Exactly. Right. It's on you, Williams. What you got?
Oh, I thought Tuck had another question, but I think he
said he was good. He said he was good.
No, I was good. I was fine.
Oh, so hey man, you know, we got to get. I got to ask. I really got 2 questions. One, have you rode in Jackson Smith and G-Buzz truck, the famous truck that everybody saw live? And 2, man, what's your scope for this game?
I've not ridden in his truck. You know, it's a situation. I certainly have players that I've known through their recruitments and everything else, and we're good. But, you know, to take a fun question and make it boring, I just think it would probably not be the best thing for me to be out riding around with players or anything else. Just would probably have just no. I haven't been able to do that. You know, now if any player wants to sit there and take me out to dinner or something like that, I as long as we drive separately, I think that's okay. But as for a score, this is the first show this week I've actually been asked to score. And, you know, we're here, you know, talking still pretty early in the week. I've been kind of working around on one. I know the line is 17.5. The last time that Notre Dame was a 17.5 or greater underdog, they lost by 18 to USC. And I think it was 2016. I looked up the stat. I think it was 2016. 17.5 is a lot of points. And it's week 1, and a lot of crazy things happen. And you know,
a lot of points.
And I know I sat there and said, you know, all these teams, there's not a huge gap in terms of talent. Yes, but I think that Ohio State is much more talented at the positions that could have the biggest impact. I think that Ohio State having a returning quarterback and a guy of the caliber of Jackson Smith and Jigba and a guy of the caliber of Trevion Henderson, I think all of that's going to matter. And I think that, you know, I'm going to take the Oklahoma State bowl game for Notre Dame and off of Marcus Freeman's resume because this isn't fair. But, you know, Marcus Freeman had kind of popped off and made some comments that, you know, maybe got misconstrued or whatever, you know, kind of saying, well, I went to Ohio State, but if I had another opportunity, I'd go to Notre Dame, or what. I think there's just enough motivation there to keep Ohio State kind of angry and pissed off. And when it's all said and done, I think that this is a game for about a quarter. Ohio State drops the hammer and then just kind of coasts throughout it. I'm liking Ohio State 42-20.
That's it. There you go.
I mean, there's nothing to say, but man, we want to have you back on later on, man, when we get a little bit more deeper in the season and other things start to develop, man. But Kevin, man, we really appreciate you for coming on, man. And if you want to tell people how to find you on social media and how they can reach you, please go ahead right now. Let us know. Absolutely.
You can find me on Twitter at Kevin_Noon. You can also find my podcast, The Big Me Kickoff, which is a playoff of the Big Noon Kickoff. I would be Big Noon as I've put on weight in my old age. You can find me on the Buckeye Huddle YouTube page. And of course, you can find me at BuckeyeHuddle.com. It's a brand new Ohio State community and website. Great team coverage, great recruiting coverage, fastest growing community in Buckeye Nation. That's at BuckeyeHuddle.com.
Kevin, man, we appreciate it, man. And once again, it's the Down South Football Podcast, man. And we'll holler back at y'all real soon, man. We'll talk to you later.